Today's lesson 9.2, we're finding circumference. We're finding circumference using diameter first. We learned earlier that the ratio of circumference to the diameter, circumference divided by diameter, is the same for all circles, and this ratio is called pi. We learned this back in our unit on proportionality and geometry, so the lesson was 4.4. We learned that every circle, if you take the circumference and divide it by the diameter, we're going to get around 3 and a little bit more. So that's where the pi comes from. This lesson says that you can approximate it as 3.14 or as 22/7. That's what it's going to say on your star chart as well. You can use pi to find a formula for circumference. So for any circle, if c over d equals pi, all we have to do is solve the equation for c to get the circumference equation. So if I want to get c all by itself on this side of my equation, then I need to get rid of the diameter. So you know from the last unit on solving equations that in order to get any variable by itself, we have to do the inverse operation. Well, the opposite of dividing by d would be to multiply both sides by d, and you should also know that these two would cancel. And so c is going to equal pi times diameter. So this is our circumference formula when we are using a diameter. That formula can be found on your star chart. C equals pi d, okay? We're going to use that formula in example number 1. They give us a picture of a circle with a line segment going straight across the circle through the center from one end point is on the circle, and the other end point, well, both end points are on the circle, and it has to go through the center. That was our definition for diameter, if you remember. Okay, it goes all the way across. So since they're giving us a diameter, we want to use the formula c equals pi times diameter. It's asking us to find the circumference, and it says to the nearest hundredth, and it also says to use 3.14 or 22/7. Just for a clarification, really the only time you want to use the fraction 22/7 is if your diameter or radius is a multiple of 7. Well, in this case, it's 8, which we know is not a multiple of 7. So we're going to go ahead and stick to the decimal, 3.14. So to find circumference, all I have to do is multiply 3.14 times 8. You're going to have to show your work off to the side. And there's no decimals on the bottom number. We're going to multiply, and we end up getting 25.12, or 25 and 12 hundredths. We want to write our answer as c equals 25 and 12 hundredths inches. So you always start with your formula, plug in your values. This is the value for pi. This is my diameter. Show your work off to the side, and then always write your answer c equals with your answer. Notice that these are not units squared because only area could be in units squared. So always just label with a unit. Okay? On the your turn, you're going to find the circumference of the circle to the nearest hundredth. Well, after I sent off for these notes, I realized that the circle was not there, so you're going to draw it in now, and our circle is going to have a diameter, that's both endpoints on the circle, all the way across through the center, of 11 centimeters. So I'm going to need you to pause your video, show all the work, the formula, the plug-in, your work off to the side with the answer in the form c equals. So pause your video. Okay, let's check your answer. Make sure you're doing this correctly. You should have started with your formula, c equals pi times diameter. Look at our diameter, it's an 11. Okay, it's not a multiple of 7, so we want to go ahead and just use the decimal, 3.14 times 11. I want to show my work off to the side. Oops. That's 4, 1, 3. Don't forget to skip a space. When I add this up and I put my total decimal places, which is 2, back in, we get 34 and 54 hundredths, and that is going to be in centimeters, so C equals 34 and 54 hundredths centimeters. Okay, you want to go ahead and write that on the line. So even though it tells you to round to the nearest hundredth, that's going to be what it might say just in case it's necessary, but in both of our cases it just wasn't necessary to do so. In the next section, we're going to be still finding circumference, but this time using a radius. Okay? Well, because we're using a radius, you know that a diameter, you should remember from that lesson back in 4.4, that a radius is half of the length of a diameter. So a diameter is 2 times the radius. So here it's telling us we could just substitute 2 times the radius for the D. Okay, 2r, we're just putting it in where the D is. Well, it also tells us we could use the commutative property, which just means like you could multiply in any order. So instead of doing pi times 2 times r on your star chart, you're going to notice that you could use either 2 times pi times r or pi d. Whenever they give you a radius, you want to use the formula with an r in it. Whenever they give you a diameter, you want to use the formula with a d in it. So because this next example is giving us a radius, which the definition of a radius is one endpoint is on the center of the circle and the other endpoint is on the circle. So it's exactly halfway across. That's a radius. We're going to go ahead and plug it into this formula, C equals 2 times pi times r. Well, notice that our radius is 14, which happens to be a multiple of 7. So we're going to use, instead of using 3.14, in this case, we are using 22 over 7 for pi. So that way you can see how to use the fraction. So 2, we're going to multiply 22 over 7 times the radius, which is 14. Well, you all know that when you're multiplying with fractions, if you have a whole number, it needs to go over 1. Okay, I could do the same thing here and put the 2 over 1. Remember when we were first learning to multiply fractions, how we use the cancellation method? We said, oh, we can simplify this. I could say 7 goes into 7 once, 7 goes into 14 twice, and now I could do top times top, bottom times bottom. Well, 2 times 22 is 44, 44 times 2 is 88, and 88 over 1 is still just 88. So the circumference would equal 88 feet, and that would be my answer. You're going to do the exact same thing on the your turn. Okay, I need to see this formula. I want you to show your plugin. I want you to show your work and put your answer in the form C equals. So press pause and try that one. All right, let's see how you did on this one. C equals 2 times pi times the radius. I'm going to plug in 22 over 7 again because what do I notice? That my radius, 21, is a multiple of 7. So I'm going to multiply times 21 over 1. I'm going to go ahead and cancel out. 7 goes into itself once. 7 goes into 21 3 times. If I put my 2 over 1 as well, then I could just do top times top and then get 44, 44 times 3. Or you could even do these two and get 66 times 2. Either way, you're going to get the same answer. C equals 132 centimeters because 1 times 1 times 1 is still just 1. So C equals 132 centimeters is my answer for that your turn. On the back of your notes, you are going to be using circumference. When these word problems, you're given the circumference and you're either asked to find the radius or the diameter of the circle. Okay, so we're going to be solving these problems. In example 3, it says a circular pond has a circumference of 628 feet. A model boat is moving directly across the pond along a radius. So it's directly across along a radius, and the rate of speed happens to be 5 feet per second. The question is, how long does it take the boat to get from the edge of the pond to the center? So just from the edge of this pond to the center, basically it's asking you to find that radius. So our circumference is the distance around our circle. It's like a perimeter. Our radius is just halfway across to the center. So we can use since we're dealing with our radius, we want to use the formula with an r in it. We're going to use 2 times pi times r, and we're going to plug in our values. This time they gave us the circumference. So this 628 feet is going to go on this side of my equation, where my c is. The 2 is already a number value, and I want to plug in my pi. I'm going to just use the decimal, 3.14, and I'm trying to find r. I don't know what r is. Well, when I start to combine like terms, we are multiplying our numbers together. Well, if I double this times 2, right, I get 6.28 r. Well, if I need to get that r isolated by itself, I have to do the inverse operation. I'm going to have to divide by 6.28. Divide by 6.28. Well, I know that 628 divided by 6.28, that decimal was just literally moved in twice to the left, which means that we ended up getting 100 for our radius. You could go show your division over here if you need to. So our radius ends up equaling 100 feet. Okay? In step 2, because that's not the answer to the question was asking us how long is it going to take the boat to get from the edge of the circle to the center. So once we find the radius, they need us to divide the radius of the pond by the speed of the boat. So we're dividing by our rate of speed. We're going to put 100 feet is being divided by, remember our rate of speed was 5 feet per second, so I'm going to divide by 5 feet per second. S is for seconds. Okay, you know that 100 divided by 5 is 20, and I could get rid of my feet, which would leave us 20 seconds. That is how long it's going to take that model boat to get from the edge of the pond to the center. You're going to do the exact same thing. It's not always going to give you a picture. So what do you do when they don't give you a picture? You draw your own picture. Okay, so press pause, read the problem, and solve using the formula, the plug-in, show your work. Okay, so in this problem, a circular garden has a circumference of 44 yards. Lars is digging a straight line along a diameter of the garden at a rate of 7 yards per hour. The question is, how many hours is it going to take him to dig across the entire garden? So again, they didn't give us a picture. You can definitely draw your own, just like they did up here for you. We know the garden is circular, so it doesn't have to be a perfect circle. Just do your best. Mine's lopsided. So we are going to say that we're looking for the diameter. We don't know what it is, but we know that the distance around the circle, which is the circumference, is 44 yards. Okay, that's my C. It's 44 yards. And I know that it's traveling at the rate of 7 yards per hour. So how long is it going to take to dig all the way across? Well, in this case, we're talking about a D. So I want to use the formula with a D in it. C equals pi times diameter. I'm going to plug in the 44 where the C is. I'm going to plug in the value for pi, 3.14, and I don't know what my d is. So I'm just going to leave it as d. I need to isolate the variable. So I'm going to do the inverse, the opposite of multiplying is dividing by 3.14. Whatever I do to one side, I do to the other. And so I'm going to have to go divide 44 by 3.14. You can show your work off to the side. 44 is being divided by 3.14. Remember, when we're dividing decimals, we move it twice to the right. Whatever we do on the outside, remember that you have to do it to the inside. Bring it up and add those zeros. Well, 314 can't go into 4 or 44, but it does go into 440. It's going to go in once. And then, let's see, subtracting here, I'm going to have to regroup. That's going to be 6 to 126. Okay, I'm going to have to bring this 0 down. 314 goes into 1260 4 times. That's 16, 4, 5, and 12. Okay, so when I subtract here, I only have a 4. I could attach another 0, bring it down. It's not going to go in. So basically, I can pretty much stop right there because you're just using an approximation. So our diameter's about 14, and this was in yards. Okay, so D equals 14 yards. But again, that's not the answer to our question. It was asking us how long is it going to take to dig all the way across the garden. So we're going to take our answer, the 14 yards, and divide it by our rate of speed, which is 7 yards per hour this time. So the yards are going to cancel out, and the 14 divided by 7 is 2 hours. That's our answer. So if anything at all was confusing to you, or you have a question, you can ask Miss Joyce or myself tomorrow. See you tomorrow.